Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here because we're tackling a massive misconception today. From the time we're young, we are basically told that becoming smart requires 12 years of grade school, 4 years of college, and then maybe another 6 years of graduate school on top of that. But let's be real for a second. Often, that traditional path just leaves you in debt and struggling to find a job, right? Well, if you think your genetics or your lack of a fancy degree makes you dumb, I have some fantastic news for you. Becoming smart is actually incredibly easy, and today we're going to break down exactly how you can do it. So why do we go through all that schooling and still feel like we don't know anything practical? It's a feeling we've all had, and it's mostly because when you and I say we want to get smarter, we don't usually mean we want to be amazing at passing standardized tests. We mean we want to acquire useful skills. We want to be really good at solving problems, ideally to make money. We want to learn difficult subjects, maybe flex our knowledge a little bit, and ultimately sound intelligent in a conversation without coming off as a total know-it-all. Traditional education just totally misses these practical, everyday goals. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the myth of getting smart.
You've definitely seen the generic internet advice, right? Eat more blueberries, they're brain food. Drink black coffee. Listen to classical music. Make sure you sleep more. It sounds great and it goes viral on social media all the time, but it is so incredibly vague. Realistically, the only people who could get smart just by following that advice are Oprah and Socrates. At some point, you literally just have to learn stuff. I mean, history is full of absolute geniuses who slept 2 hours a night and just sat at a desk. So what actually works? It's pretty simple: reading, practicing, and applying knowledge.
Which brings us to Section 2, what you should actually read. If reading is the primary mechanism for getting smarter, what exactly should you be picking up? Well, it really depends on what your goals are. Fiction is incredibly valuable. It trains you to read faster, it expands your vocabulary, and honestly, reading a ton of dialogue can seriously boost your empathy. It kind of makes you feel like you have friends. But if your goal is to casually drop really interesting knowledge into a conversation and sound educated, nonfiction is your golden ticket. Nonfiction is what gives you those hard historical facts, the scientific concepts, and the practical tidbits that actively build your foundation of the world. Moving right along to Section 3, how to sound smart, humbly. Because look, acquiring knowledge is one thing, but sharing it is a totally different ballgame. There is a very fine line between sounding smart and sounding totally obnoxious. Imagine someone says to you, "Crazy how we evolved from chimpanzees, right?" If you immediately reply with, "Well, actually, evolution is nonlinear and we didn't evolve from chimpanzees," you might be factually correct, but you've instantly made yourself unlikable. In the real world, starting a sentence with "well, actually" to prove someone wrong is just a terrible social strategy. Instead, try starting with an agreeable, "It is crazy, right? You know, I was reading the other day and apparently humans and chimps evolved side by side." By framing it humbly, you're teaching people without making them feel dumb. They learn from you and they walk away thinking you're incredibly smart and respectable. All right, Section 4, tricking your brain to remember. So, the crucial point here is 20%. You really only need to acquire 20% of the knowledge to master 80% of a skill. It's the classic learning curve. If you look at a graph of how good you get at something over time, just practicing a little bit right at the beginning yields absolutely massive progress. But yeah, there's a catch. You have to actually practice. Here is the absolute, undeniable truth. Nobody has ever learned how to tie a tie just by watching a video of someone else doing it. No way. You only learn how to tie a tie by watching it while physically tying a tie yourself. The rule is simple. Unless you practice the skill, your brain will classify that information as totally useless and just promptly forget it. Reading a book about cleaning a bedroom is only going to make you smarter if you close that book and go clean a bedroom immediately after. Now, this obviously solves a very common problem. What happens if you literally can't physically practice what you just read? Let's say you're reading about how to jumpstart a dead car. You can't exactly go hunt down 2 cars just to test it out. In that case, you have to use mental simulation. Step 1, read the info. Step 2, put yourself in the exact imaginary situation where you'd need it. Picture the dead battery, the cables, the whole environment. And step 3, mentally walk through every single motion from start to finish. By doing this, you are literally tricking your brain into believing it just performed that action, which locks it right into your memory. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 5, the ultimate learning cheat code. Now we're getting into arguably the most powerful tool for forcing your brain to retain complex information quickly. We all know the school system has its flaws, for sure, but it essentially runs on one highly effective psychological trick:
When you learn something in class, it might be 15 years before you actually use it in the real world. Your brain naturally wants to dump that useless data, so the teacher creates a school test. A test is simply an imaginary, high-stakes situation designed entirely to force your brain to remember information under pressure. If you get it wrong, you fail. That threat of failure is what forces retention. Things like spaced repetition and mind mapping are fine, but doing practice questions gives you the absolute best results because they simulate real pressure. And if you don't have practice questions, well, you need to invent them and convince yourself the stakes are sky high. Imagine this wild scenario. You are literally hanging off the cliff by one arm, and the person above you is only going to pull you up if you can name the mitochondria and every other part of a human cell. I know it sounds crazy, but creating this artificial life or death pressure in your own mind is exactly what makes information stick permanently. And this brilliantly illustrates our final and maybe most important revelation in this explainer. If practice, application, and high-stakes questions are the true mechanics of getting smarter, what is the ultimate S-tier format for learning? Believe it or not, it's the dreaded textbook. Textbooks are universally considered super boring, but they are the undisputed S-tier learning format. Why? Because they offer zero fluff, pure, undistracted information, and most importantly, built-in practice questions. They force you to engage. If you get a question wrong, there is no hand-holding. You have to flip all the way back to the Roman numerals in the appendix to figure it out yourself. This active problem-solving is exactly what forces your brain to adopt and become smarter. So, we've broken down the whole myth. We know now that becoming smart is about targeted reading, humble communication, mental simulation, and creating high-stakes practice scenarios. It's not about genetics at all. It's about actively forcing your brain to use the information. I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What high-stakes scenario will you invent to learn something new today? Pick a skill, find the pure information, and trick your brain into mastering it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now get out there and start learning.